Hello, my name is Cathy Morrow Roberson. I'm president of Logistics Trends and Insights. My little company is a market research company focused on logistics and supply chain from a global perspective. We've got a special feeling towards last mile e-commerce and such as that, but also do a lot in the freight forwarding space. And you also see that interconnecting with e-commerce as well. Welcome everyone to this webinar called Delivering for the Future, Opportunities Overlooking Last Mile Optimization. So today I am lucky to have three great co-presenters, let's just say. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask each one to introduce themselves. Let's start with Neil.
Hello, everyone. Really nice to speak to everyone today. My name is Neil McEvoy. I am a senior management consultant at C3 Solutions. C3 Solutions are a Montreal-based software company that supply to logistics, warehousing, grocery, parcel post. Really happy to be part of this today. So thanks, Cathy.
Walter.
Yes. So good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you may be these days, or today that is. So thank you. So Walt Heil with Locus Logistics. I run business for the Americas region for Locus. Locus is we like to say we're a deep technology platform for automating real-time process and human decision-making in the supply chain. More specifically, we specialize in both B2B and B2C final mile optimization and execution technology. So super excited to contribute today, and hopefully I add some value to the discussion, and somebody out there on this can take something away from the discussion that they can bring back to their business and help drive some efficiencies and help you improve how you manage your day-to-day.
Last but not least, Vishnu. Hi.
Hi, Cathy. Hi, everyone. I'm Vishnu Rajamanickam. I currently represent Charlie Pesti as the head of market intelligence and head of content. So I'm a transport and logistics journalist. Basically, I was formerly working for Freightways for about 3.5 years. I've appeared on different news outlets like Freightways. Now I write for Business Insider. So I kind of usually write a lot of commentaries on the last mile. So this is kind of a very interesting topic for me, very close to heart. And I have a few points to discuss, and I hope everyone enjoys that.
What a timely topic, particularly when the COVID pandemic hit. And all of a sudden, we as consumers discovered online ordering, and that skyrocketed and overloaded a lot of last mile providers' capacity networks and so on. And as a result, we saw rates increase, we saw capacity being cut, we saw delivery delays, and a whole host of other issues going on. At the same time, we also saw stores turn around from their main focus on their physical stores to online. And we saw a lot of investments in technology and such as that, building out their omni-channel presence and, encouraging such things as curbside pickup, deliveries to parcel lockers, third-party locations, and so on. So we're seeing the last mile evolve in a lot of ways. It was interesting for me personally with UPS and FedEx, the two big providers here in the US. They usually kept the volumes at kind of an equal split between B2B and B2C. However, all of a sudden we saw this sudden shift to B2C. So how does that shift to B2C impact the last mile delivery, the last mile process?
Generally speaking, from talking to some of the C3 customer base and just knowing a little bit about the trends in the area, I think that a lot of B2B deliveries tend to be sort of scheduled on a recurring time. And often, it's not as much of a sort of promise-related delivery like it would be B2C. With more people working from home, if you make a mistake on that B2C delivery, you're almost certain that person, that individual, the recipient, is going to complain. I think we were chatting before with Walter, and he said, these guys might just go to a competitor very easily because there's a lot of competition on the market. So the shift to that B2C sort of dynamic means that your precision, your accuracy has to be far better. And if you don't have a good system at play, whether that's your drivers, your technology, or just the whole sort of supply chain, then you become exposed very, very quickly. And I think some of the less well-prepared companies out there had a few tough weeks and even months during, when the pandemic hit across the world, because it kind of, depending whether you're in the Far East, in Europe, or the Americas, there was different stages when lockdowns happened and there was local, national sort of regulations. So if you were not prepared and you didn't have a lot of good sort of a backbone of sort of operational toolkits and systematic approaches to that extra volume, it became tough. But those who did it very well, they absorbed a lot of volume, because the shipper, the company behind, they can't deal with failure. So a couple of bad days, a couple of bad weeks, they're going to move their volume elsewhere because the volumes were up and customers were demanding, because a lot of people couldn't leave their homes. So from what I have seen, the guys who got it well have done really, really well, and those who didn't kind of are still playing catch up now, if they're still around. So it was a big shift and very important.
Yeah. And Cathy, if I might just dovetail off of Neil's comments a little bit. So, what we really saw COVID do is accelerate a trend that was already in motion, but moving far, much more slowly. So, whatever the metrics you might want to take here, some people say it was a 5-year cycle that got squeezed into about 6 months. So naturally, not everybody was prepared for that, of course. So to Neil's point, I think, the people that were better prepared, that were more nimble, the companies that had flexible technology platforms at their disposal, were able to adjust more quickly to the expectations of the consumer. What I also noticed, and we've noticed at Locus, for example, is it was a real eye-opener, for a lot of companies that were more traditional in their go-to-market. So if you think about like CPG manufacturers who've been working through their traditional retail and wholesale channels, they now saw the opportunity to go to direct to consumer, but very few of them had a real executable plan or strategy to be able to do that. So they scrambled, and most of them did not do that very well, and that was seen as an opportunity lost. So I think now a lot of these companies still see even as things go back to some degree of normalcy, they see that the shift is permanent. And they're going to have to be able to get directly to consumer at a competitive low cost, but also handling those consumer expectations, to Neil's point. It is really almost impossible to do that without technology that can support it. And it can also be technology that extends out to your providers, whether it's a captive fleet that you might use and change that fleet's behavior to go to consumer, or 3PLs or asset-based fleets for hire, those types of things. So, that's the first challenge, right? They have to be able to adjust and adapt to that and compete. And then to Neil's point, the expectations for a consumer are just much, much higher than a B2B traditional, channel like a retailer, right? You have one bad delivery, it is so easy for a consumer just to simply go to another provider and get that product.
Totally agree with what Walter said. I think the technology thing really gives people an advantage. And you've seen definitely the guys who have more transparency on their own performance, their availability, their amount of routes that they can flex up and flex down on a given day. That's very important. However, the guys that do get it right, there are some good news things in there. The ability to catch your audience at home, because they're less likely to be in the office or at the grocery store, is far increased, because you've got more drops on that route on a given day. Then your compounding costs, you're reducing your costs, your fuel, the likelihood of first time delivery increases. So again, with good technology, with a good sort of labor plan, then a lot of guys have become they've really the investment has paid off because the sort of yield has become far better than it was pre-pandemic.
What types of technology are shippers, retailers utilizing to be successful?
So there's a couple of things, right? The technology has to be nimble. And frankly, if you're not in the cloud and you're not working with a provider that provides really quick, extendable connectivity to trading partners, then it's very difficult to scale. So if you think about how quickly things change and your ability to, look at the gig economy, for example, to be able to get product or things like food or prepared food, or even the retailers in the food industry, like restaurants, to be able to get product to the customers, whether you're using your own assets and fleet or using third parties, those dependencies, you have to be able to plug in and share data and use those providers quickly. If you're running off of a legacy technology, the effort to collaborate with providers, but more importantly, shift to new providers quickly to optimize and make quick, cost-effective, service-driven decisions. If you can't do that, you're out of the game. You can't compete. So you've got to have a technology provider that offers a nimble solution, typically in the cloud, that allows for quick access to those types of logistics trading partners, whether they're yours and even a provider that has a network of providers that you can tap into that maybe you haven't used before. So that's become paramount, because if you can't do that, you're going to find it very difficult to integrate to somebody new to be able to compete.
Couldn't agree more. When I worked in industry, you would even get to the point where a prospect or a new customer would come and visit one of our central distribution centers, and they'd say, okay, what WMS are you using? And the feeling you would get from them that if you didn't have something digital, cloud-based what's your yard management? Oh, well, and I remember quite embarrassingly having to tell these guys, well, we kind of use our own system. It's a hybrid. And they're like, so you have a vehicle come on the site and you don't know where it goes? Oh, no, but we know where it goes because, but how many vehicles you have? Well, we have 400 a night. You don't have a system. And they almost like, part of them feels really good that you can do that without chaos kind of ensuing. But the other part of them goes, come on, guys, where's the investment? And that's what the customer demands out there of the shipper and the shopper are so high, because they're aware of these technologies. They use them all the time. They use apps to book everything from a taxi cab to a restaurant, right through to, buying online groceries now. So having something like Walter said, that's integrated to other areas of your business, that means that data flows correctly. You don't get human errors. You have visibility of, what part of the journey in particular, whether it's an order, a vehicle, a driver, a stop, anything along that has full visibility. And just the ability for regional managers, operational managers to get notifications. You can't expect these guys that have multiple big areas to look after to be constantly sat at a laptop or looking at a screen. You need the ability to have any exceptions, any performance information, reporting, problems to be able to be pinged. So, in C3, we always work with a customer to understand, well, what information do you really need, and when do you need it, and who needs to get what? You can't expect the same access for every user. So, that's key, is having that real transparency, and it has to be real time. You can't be looking at data that's like, a few hours old, because by that time your operation's in ruin sometimes. So, that's the key.
I like to chime in a bit on technology. So I think there have been great points already, but I want to talk about technology at large for the end-to-end ecosystem. So I'd like to talk about, vertical integration. So we already spoke about integration, data standardization and stuff, but I believe that the logistics industry would look to connect different sections of the processes, be it warehouses with last mile, or probably even upstream operations in the mid mile and the first mile. So I think at the end of the day, the end goal really is about getting to know the provenance of the product, being pushed through the supply chain. And to talk about integration, I'd say we need to mention the need for visibility and also inter-tier relationships. It's not just about what you do in operations in a siloed way within your company, but also to kind of share the data insights and probably even the data and streamline that through companies, so that it's easier for us to understand where things are at any point in time. So talking about that, stakeholder relationships, I think it's really vital, and I think it's gonna get more prominent because of the amount of consolidation, amount of acquisitions we see in the industry these days. So I think relationships mean a lot, and it's not just about siloed technology, it's about everything working in tandem. And I also think digitalization, which I think we've been talking about it for a long time now in the industry, but probably half the industry hasn't still taken it up. So digitalization is a big problem and also a big solution. So I think it is really important because different softwares come with different standards. And it's really important for us to make sure everything is standardized across a single, probably like with blockchain. That's just one example, but it's really important, that we try to make sure that the data is all streamlined and that it can be used and essentially, like I said, it's about the provenance. At the end of the day, the end customer wants to understand where his product is, the shipper wants to know the same, the warehousing wants to reduce the dwell times of their product. So essentially, it all comes back to visibility. I think it's like a trifecta of visibility, digitalization, and provenance tracking. So that's my point on technology.
Great discussion. The last mile, it never ends. It's not a linear part. The supply chain is definitely not linear. It's really circular. And the reverse logistics plays a huge role in this circular economy. So how is the industry looking to accommodate reverse logistics? What are some of the complexities involved, cost, such as that?
I'm going to comment.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I wanted to start out by saying that reverse logistics is a bit more complicated because with regard to the with normal deliveries, inbound shipment within the warehouses, it's much more palletized. So it's easier to be automated, to be moved through the warehouse and to push it out. But with regard to returns, the biggest problem is to ensure that the product that is returned, for one, it is in a unit, it is not palletized. So you got to check it, and there needs to be a person who needs to check it. It cannot be automated, at least with the kind of technology we have right now. So it is a much slower moving process. So reverse logistics, I think, takes a lot more resources, takes a lot more time to sort them out, and also to understand if they can be put back into the system. What I believe is that with e-commerce, where we see a lot more returns coming into the picture, because you didn't have so many returns when you're buying in a physical retail store. So I think with more reverse logistics being needed in the system, we'd have more economies of scale, and probably people, or rather the warehouses and the shippers themselves, would think of alternate means of collection and depositing. So probably they can ask people to go to their nearest grocery store where they can keep some boxes where they can just push it, and the postman or the delivery man come and collect it en masse. So that could be an option. So I think it would be a mix of, to solve the problem of reverse logistics, I think it's a mix of both technology and innovative models like the BOPIS, where it has gotten really famous. The buy online and pick up in store and the curbside pickup options have gotten really famous in the last year. So I think it's more of an innovation, a tweak in the way that you deliver stuff. I think we need the same style to reverse logistics. We need a tweak in the system to make it more streamlined so that people also do not feel the hassle of sending it back, because I think that's a big friction today in the market. People really are reluctant to move out of their house to deliver something back to the warehouse. So I think there's a lot of exciting things happening in reverse logistics, but for me, I believe it's a mix of innovation, the way that you convince an end customer to send back something, and also about how you streamline this process, probably where I think technology can come in.
Yeah, I Great point, Vishnu. I think that it's for me, from my experience in sort of parcels in UK and Europe, is offering your customer the greatest amount of sort of options and opportunities, because one day you might be available at home to return your item when you're receiving a new one, and that works well for the deliverer because it's one stop, it's one, slightly longer time, you've got to scan it in and stuff. But in the final mile sort of reverse logistics world, that's pretty simple. But also, like Vishnu said, offering a local store, it could be a gas station, it could be some kind of depository like a locker. But not one of these things will work every single day for a consumer, because a consumer one day will be out taking the kids to the practice, and another day will be at the office, and then even now a lot of the time at home. So I found the more flexibility, the more dynamicism you can do with that whole idea, the better it works. Now, if we're going to go one further, and the actual, operational returns of scanning, so you have proof that you have this, so the company has the goods of their client, but also doing some kind of, you have a lot of 3PLs, a lot of in-house work where they're trying to differentiate whether this is damage beyond repair, whether it's something that can be repaired, or it's something that's like just got a crack and it could be swapped out pretty quickly. And that's kind of, in my experience, falls into two worlds. One, sort of fashion, seems to be very high turnover, where something doesn't fit, something's not the right color, it's not as seen on the site. And that tends to be very, very quick. And the guys in the world that do really good returns tend to keep customers happy for the longest. So that's a real big incentive to do that process well. Technology, on the other hand, as Vishnu made very clear, is very, very difficult, because there is, even security implications where people try to give you back handsets that, where they've taken the real handset. We saw all sorts of things. So it's a very, very difficult thing that, if you don't get right, can be very costly. However, in my experience, the big players, the big electronics companies, the phone companies are willing to pay the right amount of money for people who do it well. If it's traceable, if it's secure, and if it's quick, the turnaround is reasonable, then you can keep stock levels and repair levels at a nice sort of metric, and you can continue to operate. And like Vishnu said, I'm kind of repeating a lot of what you said, but just in my experience, the guys who did had the good algorithms for their route optimization, which meant that they're going to you can return your item when you're going to get a different one delivered, rather than two separate fleets running around at quite high cost. They're the people who make the money, and the other people just lose money like it's going out of style, unfortunately. And again, I sound like a broken record, but technology is the key here, as it is with so many things in this space.
Before we go much further, do have a couple of questions coming in from the audience that I just wanted to share with y'all. So first of all, how important is the integration of last mile with the shipping process for last mile operators? And how integrated is it currently?
It has to be integrated into your mainstream delivery process, because you have to be able to not only provide the service levels that are required that we talked about earlier, and the high level of performance and precision requirements. You don't have much of a choice, I guess is my point. You really have to treat it the same way.
We have another question here. What percentage of the total logistics cost is generally allocated to the last mile? Now, I could take a stab at that. I've seen a number of percentages ranging anywhere from as low as 28% to as high as 50%. Now, that may change thanks to what's going on in the ocean freight market and the air freight market, where the rates and the cost are enormous. But y'all's thoughts on this? Have you seen anything or done any studies on this?
I was heavily involved in this when I worked in industry, and again, it's something that our customers at C3 are very conscious of. The return on investment for any if they're going to buy software and spend lots of time integrating it and implementing it, then they're going to have to get the bang for their buck. So I would often see that it would be about a third, roughly between a third and, like you say, Cathy, sometimes a half. But one great thing, and to echo from the conversations about B2C increase, is that the more delivery you can have in a small patch or postal area, then the lower those costs are. are going to be. But again, as the trucking cost goes up, you're going to have to counterbalance it somewhere, or you pass it on to the consumer, who are less likely to want to pay a premium for something they were getting much lower cost 2 weeks ago.
I'd also include the point where they source from. So it could be nearshoring, or it could be really far. So if it's nearshoring, probably the percentage of last mile is going to be much higher. But if they're probably, taking it from China to Europe, the sea prices have gone up by like 8 times. It was like $1,700 last year. Now it's like 11,000. So I think it completely depends on where you're getting your stuff from, with the volatility in the trade lanes, and probably also with the labor market. So you're going to pay everyone higher. Your percentage cut for the last mile is going to go down. So I think even within a company, this percentage keeps changing every year.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest costs, particularly when it comes to the last mile, is the labor part, because you got to have someone make the delivery. There are robots out there that are making some deliveries, but they're still in test in a lot of areas. But for the most part, it's human beings that's making these final mile deliveries, whether it's to our front door, to a locker, to a third-party location, or wherever. A lot of the startups, a lot of the options that are being utilized now in particular is from folks such as from Instacart, DoorDash, these gig type of platforms. And I know, Vishnu, we had talked about this prior to this webinar. So I'm going to throw it over to you, because I think you made some very good, valid points on the use of these gig workers.
Sure. I'd say that the gig economy has been growing in significance due to the presence of, on-demand last mile delivery. But sooner or later, we would see issues with, getting enough last mile workers to fill in the demand, because the demand keeps increasing. But millennials are really skeptical to join the industry. I think this would be, due to two reasons. One, last mile delivery is probably one of the hardest logistics jobs out there, and people are not actually looking to join the workforce unless they're very desperate. And when the economy picks up, I think a lot of these guys who work in the last mile today, be it on demand or be it with delivery, like normal delivery, I think they'll go searching for greener pastures. So retention, I think, would be the biggest problem with regard to the gig economy. And I was talking to a friend of mine from the industry, and he was telling me how the baby boomer generation is about to, retire en masse. And this generation was essentially, it was propping up the driver community for the better part of probably 2 decades now. And so he was telling me that baby boomers made up around 50% of the driver workforce, 50% in 2006, and now it's just 25%. So most of them would probably retire in the next 5 years. And if there aren't enough millennials to take up the job, we might actually face a massive crunch, much, much bigger than the scale we see today. So I think, going back to the point about vertical integration before, I think we cannot overlook the need for, worker rights and the need to, ensure a safe and secure working environment for everyone. So I think this could probably mean taking the workers out of the gig economy and providing them a secure job and some benefits, health insurance and stuff. It's not going to hurt. I think in the longer run, I believe retention would, pay itself forward in terms of operational expenses that kind of register on the bottom line. And I believe that we'll be hearing a lot more discussion around worker rights, increasing wages, and essentially improving retention. I believe that even when there's a lot of automation that's happening in the industry with regard to could be delivery drones, pedestrian robots and stuff. I think even after all that, humans would always be an integral part of the last mile delivery process, and taking care of these workers is, really critical for the health of the ecosystem at large.
Okay. We've got a few more questions in the Q&A. One of them I did want to bring up just quickly, that is the practicality and usefulness around the use of drones in the last mile.
So there is a lot of technology, I think, that's being developed. So even with the drones that we were talking about, I think it's not just the regulations, right? Just think of it in a practical sense. So let's say a father and a son, they're playing in a park. They don't want to hear lots of drones flying about and making a lot of noise in the park. They want to enjoy some peace and quiet. So how would they take that? Would people be interested in having drones whiz above their heads every single day? Would the birds that are around the park be okay with this? Would they not get, and also the problem with vandalism, probably an autonomous robot, a pavement robot moving on the pavement. How are we to say that someone's not going to attack it and take it away? So there are so many issues associated with technology, which has to be looked at in a very realistic perspective to see if this can work in reality. So I would say that a lot of technology is being developed by developers who have a very limited understanding of how the real world works. And I would say that, to me, the most important part is to make sure that everything works seamlessly and everything seeks to just do one thing, that's to help the end customer feel great about their purchase.
Wonderful. Great way to end a great webinar. Walter, Neil, Vishnu, thank you again. And with that, appreciate the participants for hanging in there with us. Great questions, great thoughts from everyone. And with that, thank you and have a great day.